Hello students, myself Archana Rathi, and today the topic we are going to take is a very important topic from the NEET point as well as from the board point of view, and that is organisms and populations. So let's start without delaying. So before understanding this chapter, first of all, let's understand that what is ecology. We all know that ecology is the interaction between the organism and their environment. We, the organisms, are the biotic components and the surrounding environment is the abiotic component. So basically, ecology is the interaction between the biotic and the abiotic components. Now, if we talk about the whole ecology, there are several levels of organization in the ecology, levels of organization, that how this environment, how this life is getting sustained. What are the levels of organization? The first and the basic level of organization is the organism itself. Every individual, right? Every living organism is the basic unit of ecology. So, organism, that means an individual entity. An individual is the structural unit of ecology. What is the meaning of structural unit? That these different organisms, they ultimately will form the whole biosphere, right? So, organism is the smallest and the structural unit of the ecology. Then comes the population. When the group of same kind of organisms is called as a population, like a human population, tiger population. So population is a group of same individuals, right? Same individuals or organisms. So after organisms, the bigger level, after organisms, we are talking about a group, and that group is called a population. And then after population comes the community. Now, what is community? Community is the collection of populations. Different type of populations, when interact with each other, then it forms a community. So it's a collection of populations of different species. Suppose in a forest, there is a tiger population, there is a deer population, right? So a group of different populations is called as a community. And in a community, you see several interactions. You see several interactions in a community, like predation, like competition, etc. Right? And then comes the ecosystem. So ecosystem is a place where the biotic components, the organisms, they interact with the environment. Up till now, I have not talked about the external environment. Organism, then group of organism is population, and the group of different populations is a community. So up till now, I am talking only about the biotic agent, but ecosystem is the first group where I will be talking both about the both biotic and abiotic agents, right? So ecosystem is a unit which represents the interaction between the biotic and abiotic agents. Between the biotic and abiotic agents. Okay, so getting it? First organism, then population, then community, and different type of communities, they form an ecosystem where those communities, they interact with their external environment. Then after ecosystem comes landscape. A landscape is a large area with its own boundary. It's a large area with its own boundary, which is formed by various type of ecosystems. So it's a large area with its own boundary. And then comes the biome. Biome is the larger unit, and every biome represents a specific vegetation type. Like if I talk tropical rainforest, if I talk grasslands. So a biome is a very larger area which represents a specific vegetation type. So it's a large area which represents specific vegetation type. Specific vegetation type. Okay. And then comes the biosphere. Biosphere is the whole earth, which contains both atmosphere, hydrosphere and lithosphere. So it is the largest unit which contains both atmosphere, that means the life within the air and the environment, lithosphere, that is the terrestrial habitat, and the hydrosphere, that is the aquatic habitat, right? So I hope you are getting the levels of organization. First, organism, then population, then community, then ecosystem, then landscape, then biome, and the largest one is the biosphere. But I told you this so that you can understand what is the level of organization. But according to NCERT, read the line of NCERT are very important. Ecology is basically concerned with 4 levels of biological organization. It is saying that ecology, the most important biological organizations are, according to NCERT, organism, population, community, biome. Remember this. According to NCERT, the 4 most important levels of organization are organism, population, community, biome. Just remember this, OPCB. Just remember this, OPCB. Organism, population, community and biome. Okay. Now, if I talk about ecology at the organismic level, if I want to make you understand that how will I explain ecology at my level? How will I explain ecology at individual level? So at individual level, the ecology can be understood by physiological ecology. By physiological ecology, that I am an individual, what are the different kind of metabolic reactions, what are the different kind of metabolism is occurring inside me, physiology is occurring inside me because of the external environment I am living in. So this is important line. At the organism level, the ecology can be understood or studied as physiological ecology. As physiological ecology. Okay. So now let's move on. These are the different biomes given over here. These are the different biomes given over here. And let's understand what this diagram is trying to say. Because this is a diagram of NCERT, so it's important. Here you can see, beta, that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 kind of biomes, right? So there are 6 different kinds of biomes given in this diagram. First, you can see the tropical forest. You can see the tropical forest. Now let's see what tropical forest is saying to us. At the x-axis, it is saying mean annual precipitation. Mean annual precipitation means what is the mean rainfall throughout the year. Mean annual temperature. Throughout the year, what is the average temperature? What is the mean annual temperature? So, if I talk about the tropical forest, the mean annual temperature is about 20 degrees centigrades. That is not very high, not very low. And see, the rainfall is also very good. It ranges from 150 centimeter to 400 centimeter. So that is why, because mean annual precipitation is very high from 150 to 400 and the annual temperature is also 20 degrees centigrades. That is why there is very, very high biodiversity in tropical forests. You must have heard the name of Amazon forests. So Amazon forest are the tropical rainforest, which has the highest biodiversity on earth. Then comes the grasslands. The grasslands have the mean annual precipitation of about 50 to 200 and the mean annual temperature ranges from about 10 to 20. So they also have a nice productivity, but not as high as of tropical forests. Now, the temperate forests. Temperate forest, the mean annual temperature ranges from 0 to 10 and the precipitation ranges from 50 to around 250 centimeter. The Arctic tundra, yes, the Arctic and the alpine tundra, they have less biodiversity. Why they have less biodiversity? Because you can see the mean annual temperature ranges from -10 to -5 and the mean annual precipitation is below 100 centimeter. That is why the Arctic and the alpine tundra has very low biodiversity. And likewise, in case of deserts, see, the mean annual temperature is less than 50 centimeter and the average temperature lies between 5 to 20. So because the mean annual precipitation is so low, deserts also have very low productivity. So these are the different kinds of biomes given over here. I hope you understood that how you have to interpret and learn this diagram. Now, in NCERT, it is given that India has 4 major biomes. Here, I have discussed the various kind of biomes found in the world, but here I am discussing the major kind of biomes found in India. These kind of questions can come directly. So, what are the major biomes that are found in India? The first one is the tropical rainforest. The first one is the tropical rainforest. The second one is the deciduous forest. The third one is the desert, and the fourth one is the sea coast. So, how many major biomes are found in India? So you will say tropical rainforest, temperate forest, desert and sea coast, right? Okay. Now let's move further. Now what is it saying? Let's see. Now let's understand. We have understood what is the levels of organization. But now let's understand 2 important topics. One is called as habitat and the another one is called as ecological niche. Ecological niche. So let's read the beautiful lines of NCERT, which are very beautiful and the question can come directly. Now this is saying what are the key elements that lead to so much of variation in physical and chemical conditions of different habitats. We have, so I have just told you, we have deserts, we have grasslands, we have tropical rainforests, we have temperate forests. So the question is asking that what are these conditions which decide so many kind of, different kind of habitats and different kinds of animals residing in those habitats. So the most important ones are temperature, water, light and soil. These are the 4 factors: the temperature, the water, the soil and the light, which decides that what kind of a biome, what kind of ecosystem will it be and what kind of organism will be present over there. So these are the 4 major deciding factors which decides that what kind of biome or ecosystem will it be. Now, this is very important. The physiochemical components alone do not characterize the habitat of an organism. What is a habitat? What is the meaning of habitat? A habitat is the address of any organism, where the organism is living. That is the habitat. But the characteristic of habitat is not decided only by the abiotic component, that what kind of soil, what kind of temperature, what kind of, light conditions will be there. Only the abiotic components do not decide habitat, but the habitat includes biotic components also, like pathogens, parasites, predators, competitors of the organism with which they interact constantly. This is very important. A habitat is formed. A habitat where the organism lives. A habitat represents the address of the organism where the organism lives. But this habitat is made up of both biotic and abiotic components. What are the abiotic components? Light, Water, temperature, soil. And what are the biotic components? The pathogens, the parasites, the predators, and the competitors. These all are the biotic agents. Now, let's understand what is ecological niche. I have just told you that the address of the organism is called as the habitat. Then what is ecological niche? Ecological niche is the functional role a particular organism is performing in its habitat. Like, my habitat is my organization, that is PW. So my organization, PhysicsWallah, PW, is my habitat, right? But what is the role I am performing in my habitat? I am performing the role as a botany teacher. So my role as a botany teacher, right, is my ecological niche. So I hope you are getting my point. The address is the habitat, and what kind of functional role is performed by a particular organism in the habitat is called as the ecological niche. So ecological niche is the functional role performed by the organism. Okay, now let's read the very important lines of NCERT. Each organism, very important lines, each organism has an invariably defined range of conditions that it can tolerate, diversity of the resources it utilizes, and a distinct functional role in the ecological system is called as the niche of the. So according to NCERT, how will you define an ecological niche? It is saying that all the conditions an organism can tolerate, all the conditions an organism can tolerate, how it is using the resources from the habitat, and what is the functional role it is performing in the habitat is the ecological niche. Are you getting my point? The different kind of conditions in the habitat an organism can tolerate, what is the different kind of resources it is using from the habitat, and what is the functional role of the organism. This all together is called as the niche of the organism. Okay, so I hope you understand the difference between habitat and ecological niche. So these lines of NCERT, I am writing over here. These lines of NCERT are very important. So let's move further now. Yes, the major abiotic components, abiotic, non-living components, the environmental components which decides the flora and fauna of any area are light, temperature, water and soil. Light, temperature, water and soil. And the most important, according to NCERT, the most important environmental factor is temperature. Remember this point. And after temperature, the second most important factor is water. All four of them are important, but the question can come, which is the most important one? Then your answer will be temperature. So let's discuss them one by one. First of all, let's take temperature. First of all, let's take temperature. How temperature is deciding that what kind of habitat will it be? Temperature is very important. Why? Because it decides the kinetics of the enzymes. You know that in the body of every organism, metabolic reactions are happening, and those metabolic reactions, they are controlled by the enzymes, and the activity of the enzyme is controlled by temperature. So temperature controls the kinetics of enzymes. The kinetics of enzymes, and thus controls the metabolism of an organism, and thus controls the metabolism of an organism. That is why temperature is called as the most important environmental factor, because it controls the various reactions occurring inside the organism, right? And you know that there are so many ranges of temperature. You know, sub-zero temperature. You can see sub-zero temperature in Arctic and Antarctic, in the polar areas. And there you see different kind of life. Then you can see deep hydrothermal vents. They have so high temperature, approximately 100 degrees centigrades. The deep hydrothermal vents. So the temperature decides that what kind of animals and what kind of plants will be found in a particular area. So the temperature decides the kinetic of enzyme, and based on the temperature, we can classify organisms. Based on the temperature, we can classify organisms into two categories. And those are stenothermal organisms and eurythermal organisms. Stenothermal and eurythermal organisms. Stenothermal organisms are organisms which can tolerate only a narrow range. Organisms which can tolerate a narrow range of temperature. A narrow range of temperature. But the eurythermal are those organisms which can tolerate a wide range of temperatures. Can tolerate a wide range of temperature. Right? So, like us, we are eurythermal organisms. All the warm-blooded organisms are eurythermal, like the birds and the mammals. So, the birds and the mammals, they are the eurythermal organisms. We can tolerate a wide range of temperature. If you take us to the Ladakh or Leh, where the temperature is -4 or -5, if you measure your body temperature will be 37 degrees centigrade. And if we are taken to a desert where the temperature per se is 52 degrees centigrades, then also if we will measure the temperature of our body, it will be 37 degrees centigrades. That means we can tolerate a wide range of temperature. So we are eurythermal organisms. And all the cold-blooded organisms like snake, lizards, right? They all are the stenothermal organisms, like snake, lizards, etc. So are you getting my point? So this is how temperature is such an important factor which controls the flora and fauna of any area. Then after temperature, let's come to water. Water is the second most important factor, because you know that 70% of in us, 70% is water, and in plants also 70% in water. In some plants like watermelon, it contains approximately 95% of water. So water is essential for life. Why it is essential for life? Because of many reasons. It acts as medium for the various reactions occurring in our body. Act as medium for various reactions. If the water is not there, then who will act as the medium for the various reactions occurring in our body? Water increases the productivity of plants. And because it increases the productivity of plants, that is why the animals in that habitat which is surviving on plants can also grow. So this is how water controls the life in any particular area. Now, the aquatic life, the plants and the animals which are found in the water, they are affected by the pH, the chemical composition of water, right? The kind of plants and the kind of animals which will be found in water, in the aquatic habitat, it will be affected by the pH and the composition of water. Like it is given in NCERT that the salinity, the amount of salt present in water also affects the kind of life it would be found there. So salinity is a measure of the presence of salt in the water. So it is measured as ppt, parts per thousand. Remember this, this is important. It is not measured as ppm, parts per million, rather it is measured as parts per thousand. So according to the data of NCERT, if I talk about the inland water is the water of rivers, lakes, ponds, etc. So the salinity of the inland water is less than 5 ppt, less than 5 ppt, parts per thousand, whereas the salinity of seawater is around 30 to 35 ppt, parts per thousand, and the salinity of hypersaline lagoons is more than 100 ppt. Hypersaline lagoons, the kind of, depressions are formed over there in which the water comes and the water evaporates and there is high amount of salt in that water. So this is the data given in NCERT. It is important. Inland water less than 5 ppt, seawater 30 to 35 ppt, and hypersaline lagoons more than 100 ppt. So this is how water affects the life. Then after water comes the light. Light is also very important. There are several aspects of light which affects the productivity in case of plants. The quality of life, light. So quality of light, quantity of light, and the duration of light. So quality of light, that if I talk about in case of plants, they can use only the light from 400 to 700 nanometer, right? And that is called as PAR, photosynthetic active radiation. Quantity means light intensity. How many energy packets or quanta will be incident per unit area is the light intensity. Neither the very high light intensity nor the very low light intensity should be there. Optimum light intensity increases the productivity, and duration means the photo period. You must have understood in plant growth development what is a photo period and how the photo period affects the process of flowering in case of plants and the productivity. So all these aspects of light affects the productivity in plants, and obviously light, because of this light, the plants perform photosynthesis. So light is very important for plants. Then comes the animals. For animals also, light is very important because they are also dependent on photo period. That means the various activities of plants, also depend upon the duration of light, because the duration of light affects the migration activities and the seasonal breeding in the animals. And seasonal breeding in animals. Okay. So photo period, light is very important for both plants and animals, because plants, they require light for photosynthesis, for flowering. They are dependent on the light intensity for the photosynthesis, and animals are also dependent on the duration of light, because their migration activities and their seasonal breeding is dependent on the light. Okay. And on the basis of light, we can divide the plants into two categories. On the basis of light, we can divide the plants into two categories, that is heliophytes and skyophytes. those plants which can grow under low light conditions. The plants which are adapted to grow under low light conditions, they are called as skyophytes, and the plants which are adapted to grow under high light conditions, that means they need sunlight, they need proper sunlight to grow, those are the heliophytes. Heliophyte means sun loving, which needs light energy for their growth. Okay. One more thing I wanted to add here in the salinity part, that on the basis of tolerance of salinity, that the organism can tolerate high salinity or low salinity. The organisms are of two types, that is euryhaline and stenohaline. Euryhaline and stenohaline. Again, it is important that euryhaline means wide range of salinity. Those organisms which can tolerate the wide range of salinity, and stenohaline which can tolerate low range of salinity, right? And the example taken can be, the example of euryhaline organism can be salmon fish. Salmon fish can tolerate wide range of salinity. And the example of stenohaline is shark fish, which can tolerate low range of salinity. Okay. So now comes the water, the last abiotic factor, that is what? Oh, sorry. The last abiotic factor, that is soil. Soil obviously is so important because many organisms, they reside in the soil, and the plants can grow only in the soil. They cannot live on the air, right? So soil is important, and the soil related factors, this is important, this question comes directly. All the soil related factors are called as edaphic factors. All the soil related factors are called as edaphic factors. And the composition of soil, what is the composition of soil? How much is the amount of clay? How much is the amount of sand? How much is the amount of grain size is present? The pH of the soil, the water holding capacity of the soil, all these things, they decide that what kind of vegetation will be there in the habitat, and the vegetation decides what kind of animal life will be there in the habitat. So this is how soil is also a very important factor. So up till here, we have discussed the various levels of organization and the various abiotic factors and what is the contribution of those abiotic factors. Now let's move on to the response to the abiotic factors. Now I have just told you that the four abiotic factors, four non-living factors, that is temperature, water, soil and light, they affect the life. Then now understand how we, the living organisms, give response to these factors. So response to abiotic factors. We, the living organism, can give response to our environment in four ways, either by regulating, or by conforming, or by migrating, or by suspending. So these are the four ways in which we, the living organism, give our response to our environment. Okay, remember them. These are the four ways. Now let's discuss them one by one. First of all, let's discuss what is regulation. What is to regulate, right? Regulate, those organisms who regulate, they are called as regulators. Those organisms which regulate are called as regulators, right? So these are the organisms which do not allow the external environment to change their internal environment. They regulate, they fight up to their last breath to maintain their internal environment. And those organisms are called as regulators. So how these regulators are responding to their external environment? By not getting affected by the external environment and maintaining their own internal environment. So regulators are those organisms which do not allow external environmental conditions to change their internal environment, right? So, and why can they do this? How they can do this? Because they have a very special mechanism inside them, and that is called as homeostasis. All the regulators, they show homeostasis. What is the meaning of homeostasis? Maintenance of internal environment. Maintenance of internal environment is called as homeostasis. They maintain their internal environment. When there is too hot outside, then we sweat. When there is too cold outside, we shiver, right? What is this? These are the means by which we maintain our internal environment. So we, the human beings, we are homeostatic. We show a very important phenomenon, that is homeostasis. But the question comes in my mind that if regulation is so good, then why not all the organisms on earth are regulators? Because homeostasis cannot be afforded by everyone. It is very energy expensive process. Homeostasis is very energy expensive. This question can come, that why all the organisms are not regulators if regulating is so good? So you will say that all the organisms cannot afford homeostasis because it is very energy expensive. You need a hell lot of energy to maintain your internal environment. Then what are the examples of regulators? The examples of regulators are all birds, all the birds, the mammals, all the mammals, the human beings, rats, whale, elephant, all the mammals, then very few lower vertebrates and invertebrates. Examples are important. Remember, birds, mammals, and very few lower vertebrates and invertebrates are the examples of regulators. Then the second one comes the conformers. Those organisms who conform, they are called as conformers. Who are conformers? Conformers are those organisms which change their internal environment according to the external environment, which change their internal environment according to external environment. Okay, according to external environment. So they cannot maintain their internal environment. They change according to their outer environment. And what are the examples of conformers? Important. The examples of conformers are nearly 99% animals. 99% of animals on earth, they cannot maintain their internal environment, and nearly all plants, nearly all plants. So nearly all plants and 99% of the animals of earth, they cannot maintain their internal environment because it is very expensive. And then comes a third category that is called as the partial regulators. Partial regulators are those organisms which maintain their internal environment up to a limit. They fight that no, we have to maintain our internal environment. But after that, because maintaining the internal environment is so energy expensive that after a point of time they get exhausted and they say, okay, now we will change according to the external environment. So, which maintain the internal environment up to a limit. Yeah, we can say which regulate up to a limit. Those organisms which regulate up to a limit. Regulate means they maintain their internal environment, which regulate up to a limit, after which they simply conform. After that limit, they simply change according to the environment, after which they simply conform. So up to a limit, they are regulators, they fight, but after that, they simply conform. Okay. So now, if I make a graph to make you understand that what are regulators, conformers, and partial regulators. So here I will put the external condition. Let me see what is given here in the NCERT. Yeah. So let's understand it here and only. So how we will read this graph? See, on the x-axis, external environment is given. On the y-axis, internal environment is given. Okay. So if I draw the line like this, what is the meaning of this? If I draw the line like this, see, I am changing the external environment, but the internal environment is not getting changed. It is constant, right? I am changing the external environment, but the internal environment is constant. It is not getting changed. That means this is a regulator. Then, if I draw the graph like this, if I'm changing the external environment, the internal environment is changed, and this will go on. So obviously this is a conformer. Then comes up to a limit, some organisms, they fight, but after which they simply conform. Up to a limit they fight, but after that they simply conform. So obviously this is partial regulator. So I hope you got the point. So how to read this? Regulator, conformer, and partial regulator. So we have understood what is regulation and conformation. Now let's understand what is migration. Some organisms, when they find that the current environmental conditions are not good for us and they don't want to fight, so they simply run away. If they are thinking that, oh, this environment is not good for me, I don't want to fight, I just want to run away to a more comfortable place. So that is migration. When the organisms migrate from unfavorable conditions to favorable conditions, that is migration. So this is how they respond to the external environment. And the very classic example is the migration of Siberian cranes. Every year, these Siberian cranes, they come from Siberia to the Keolado National Park found in Bharatpur in Rajasthan. Every year they come when the conditions in Siberia becomes very cold for them. So migration is to move away from unfavorable conditions to favorable conditions. To favorable conditions. Okay. Then the example is migration of Siberian crane. This is the Siberian crane you are seeing in the diagram. Migration of Siberian crane from Siberia to this is given in NCERT, to Keolado National Park. Keolado National Park. And where it is situated? This is situated in Bharatpur, Rajasthan. So this question often comes. This is situated in Bharatpur, Rajasthan. Okay. So this is one of the ways of the reaction. And then comes the last method of responding to abiotic conditions, and that is suspension. Suspensions means when the organism find out that the current situation is not good for me. So what they do, they become inactive. They suspend their activities for that point of time, and when the favorable conditions come, they again become active. So this is suspension. So suspension is the organism suspends its activities and becomes inactive during unfavorable conditions. During unfavorable conditions. Okay. Now, what are the examples of suspension? We can take the example of formation of thick-walled spores. Formation of thick-walled spores. And this is seen in case of bacteria, fungi, and algae. So what happens in bacteria, fungi, and algae? When the unfavorable conditions come, they form special type of spores, thick-walled spores, which is resistant towards the unfavorable conditions. And when the favorable condition comes, these spores, they give rise to new fungi, new algae, or new bacteria. So this is how they cope up with the unfavorable conditions, by forming the thick-walled spores. Then comes the example of plants. How do plants suspend? Plants form seeds, and the seed show a very important property, and that is called as dormancy. Dormancy. When the embryo present inside the seed finds that the conditions are not favorable, proper light, water, nutrients are not available, then the seed will be inactive, the seed will be dormant, right? So this is the example of suspension. Okay, and they form vegetative propagules. They also form vegetative propagules like corm, like tuber, right? Like rhizome. So what are these? These all are the vegetative propagules. These vegetative propagules, they help the plant to pass over the unfavorable conditions and can give rise to new plant during favorable conditions. Then comes another method of suspension, and that is hibernation. Hibernation is the winter sleep. It is the winter sleep. During winters, the organism becomes inactive, and you know that it is shown by the bears. They hibernate. Then comes the estivation. The estivation is called as summer sleep. Some of the organisms, they become inactive during summer, and the examples are fish and snail. They show estivation. Then comes another method of suspension, and that is diapause. Diapause, this is shown by zooplanktons. What are zooplanktons? These are microscopic. These are microscopic animals found in the water. These are microscopic animals found in water, right? So this is important. These are the different ways of suspension shown by the organisms. Formation of thick-walled spores, or formation of seed, dormancy in the seed, formation of vegetative propagules, or hibernation, or estivation, or diapause. Question comes directly from this part. Diapause is shown by zooplanktons. Okay, so these are the various methods of suspension. Now we have understood that the organisms can give response to the abiotic components or to their environment by 4 ways, either by regulating, by conforming, by migrating, or by suspending. Okay, now let's move further. Now let's understand adaptations. What are adaptations? Adaptation is also a way to cope up with the environment. Some organisms, they change their physiology, their morphology, their anatomy to cope up with the environment. So what you can say that adaptations are the changes shown by organism to cope up with the environment. To cope up with the environment. And these changes can be genetically fixed. That means they can be genetically fixed and can be inherited from one generation to another, or it can be epigenetic. What is the meaning of epigenetic? That it is not inherited. The change will not be inherited to the offsprings, but will go away with the organism, right? So during the course of evolution, many adaptations are genetically fixed. They are inherited to their offsprings, but some of them are epigenetic also. So adaptations can be of 3 types or 4 types. Adaptations can be morphological adaptation. Morphological means if the organism changes its external appearance to cope up with the environment, that is morphological adaptation. Then adaptation can be anatomical. That means if the organism changes the internal structure for the because of the environment. Then comes the physiological adaptation. What is the meaning of physiological adaptation? The organism changes the different functions in the body to cope up with the environment. And the adaptation can be behavioral. That means sometimes the organism changes its behavior to cope up with the environment. Okay, so now here in the diagram, this is a beautiful kangaroo rat. This is the kangaroo rat. And this kangaroo rat is found in North American deserts, where there is scarcity of water. right? So this kangaroo rat shows physiological adaptations. It shows physiological adaptation to cope up with the environment. Shows physiological adaptation to cope up with the environment. And what kind of physiological adaptation? First, it oxidizes the fat present in its body to form water as byproduct. Because the rat knows that it will not get the water from outside, so it has changed its bodily functions. It has acquired a mechanism in which it oxidizes the fat inside the body and water is produced as the byproduct. So it produces the water inside its body only. And second, the urine of this organism is highly concentrated. That means it does not allow the water to go waste in its urine. So the urine is highly concentrated. So kangaroo rat, to cope up with the scarcity of water, it shows the physiological adaptation. Okay. Now let's take the another example, and the another example is of desert lizard. Here you can see a desert lizard, and this desert lizard show behavioral adaptation. It shows behavioral adaptation. That means to cope up with the environment, it shows change in its behavior. If it finds that the temperature is very high outside, then it will go to the shady areas. And if the lizard will find that the temperature outside is low, then it will go outside and will bask in the sun. So it changes its behavior according to the changing environment. So this is behavioral adaptation. Then comes the opuntia, very important example. Opuntia. It is a type of cactus. It belongs to Cactaceae family. So all the kind of cactus like Opuntia, Euphorbia, which belongs to the Cactaceae family, they show beautiful adaptations. So this show 3 types of adaptations, very important. It shows 3 types of adaptations: morphological adaptation, anatomical adaptation, and physiological adaptation. What are the morphological adaptations and why these all are done? To prevent loss of water. To prevent loss of water, Opuntia has developed 3 kinds of adaptations. Morphological adaptations means they have pillowclade. And you must have read this in morphology, that a pillowclade is a stem which has been changed to perform photosynthesis. So one of the adaptations is that their stem becomes photosynthetic, and that stem is called as pillowclade. Very important question, very important. Then their leaf gets modified into spines. So these are the 2 important morphological adaptations. Anatomical adaptations are that they have thick cuticle on their leaves. You know that cuticle is the waxy covering found on the leaves which prevent the loss of water. So because of a thick covering of cuticle on their leaves, the loss of water is prevented. And they have sunken stomata. They have sunken stomata. That means their stomata is not exposed towards outside in the epidermis, but it is embedded towards the inner side in the epidermis. So they have sunken stomata. Then what are the physiological adaptation? They have a special cycle called as a CAM cycle. CAM, right? They have C3 cycle, but apart from C3 cycle, they have CAM cycle to prevent the loss of water. Because during the CAM cycle, the stomata remains closed during day and open during night. Remains closed during day and open during night. So that is why they prevent the water loss during day. Okay, so these are beautiful adaptations shown by the plant Opuntia. Now, there are some other examples also given in NCERT, and some of the adaptations are Archibacteria. Archibacteria, you know, it's a special type of bacteria which is found in hot sulfur springs. It can tolerate, I have told you this in biological classification, that Archibacteria can tolerate harsh conditions. It can tolerate high acid concentration, high salt concentration, high temperature, right? So they can easily tolerate hot sulfur springs, that is approximately 80 degrees centigrade temperature. Then another example of adaptation given in NCERT is the example of the organisms in polar areas. Organisms in the polar areas, like the polar seal. So what do they have? They have blubber. They have blubber. What is blubber? Blubber is a thick layer of fat, under their skin, which act as insulator and prevents them from cold, right? So this is again important, that the fishes, the seal, which are found in the polar areas, they have thick layer of fat under skin which act as insulator. Not fishes, sorry. Aquatic organisms like the polar seal. Okay, then comes areas of low temperature. In the areas of low temperature, some fishes survive easily. And how they survive easily? Because they have some antifreeze compounds in them. They have some antifreeze solutes which help these fishes so that they are not frozen in the cold environment. So they have antifreeze solutes. Then comes the example of altitude sickness. The example of altitude sickness. What happens when the people which resides in the area of plains, when they go to Himalayas or Ladakh or Leh, where at very height, so they find difficulty in inhaling, in breathing. This is called as altitude sickness. But in a day or two, they acclimatize, they change according to the external environment to cope up. How? So altitude sickness, to cope up the altitude sickness, the changes which are shown by organism to cope up, to adjust with the altitude sickness, the changes shown are: first, increased RBC production. Increased RBC production. The number of RBCs, they increase so that more and more oxygen can be bind with the RBC. Then decreased binding capacity of hemoglobin with oxygen. Decreased binding capacity of hemoglobin with oxygen. If the hemoglobin will be binded for the oxygen for a longer period, then the oxygen will not be released in the blood quickly. And because of the low partial pressure at the heights, we need oxygen to be released very rigorously into our blood. So the binding capacity of hemoglobin gets decreased with oxygen so that the hemoglobin will easily release oxygen into the blood, which is required at most during this condition. And then increased breathing rate. Because we need more and more oxygen, so breathing rate gets increased. So increased breathing rate. This question comes directly, that what are the different changes that the organism show to cope up with the altitude sickness? Increased RBC production, increased breathing rate, and decreased binding capacity of hemoglobin with oxygen. Okay, so these are the different examples of adaptation. Now let's move on to the another part of the chapter, and that is population attributes. What are population attributes? There are some parameters which cannot be explained with the help of an individual. You can explain those parameters only in a population, like birth rate, death rate, sex ratio, age pyramids, population density. These all are the population attributes. You can explain all these things in a population, not on an individual basis, right? So the question comes directly, what are population attributes? So you will say these 5 things. So let's understand one by one. First of all, let's take the birth rate. Let's take the birth rate. So what is birth rate? Birth rate is the number of live births. It is the number of live births per 1000 individuals. Per 1000 individuals in a year. Okay. So in a year, per 1000 individuals, how many live births have occurred? That is called as the birth rate. Then comes the death rate. Birth rate in another terms is also called as the rate of natality. It is also called as the rate of natality. And the death rate in another terms is also called as mortality. Again, the number of deaths, right, which have occurred per 1000 individuals in a year is called as the death rate. Okay, so this is birth rate or death rate. Now, how to calculate birth rate or death rate? If I say that in a pond, this is the example of NCERT, so it is important. In a pond, there were 20 lotus plant. There were 20 lotus plant last year, right? And this year, in this pond, in the current year, this year in the pond, there are 28 plants. And they are asking that calculate the birth rate in the pond. Last year, the number of lotus plants were 20 and this time it is 28. Then calculate the birth rate. So how will you calculate? You will calculate the birth rate will be calculated as delta n upon n into delta t. What is, just a second, beta. What is delta n here? What were the number of individuals last year? This year 28, last year 20. So delta n is the change that has occurred upon n. What is the initial population size? 20, and I am taking 1 year. So this will be equal to 8 upon 20, that is 0.4. This is how you count the birth rate. So how will I interpret this? I will say that 0.4 individuals are added per individual. 0.4 individuals are added per lotus plant in a year. every lotus plant add 0.5 individual in a year to a pond. This is how this is interpreted. Okay. If I talk about the death rate per se, if it is saying that in a lab there are 40 fruit flies, there are 40 fruit flies and 4 are dead. 4 are dead in a time of 1 week. So in a time of 1 week, 4 fruit flies are dead, and the initial size of the fruit flies, population size of the fruit flies were 40. So how will you calculate the death rate? You will calculate as the number of deaths. How many deaths? 4. How many individuals were there? 40. So it will come out to be 0.1. So you will say that there are 0.1 death per individual in a week. Okay, so this is how birth rate or death rate is calculated. So after birth rate and death rate, let's discuss about the age pyramids. The age pyramids. So what age pyramids tell you about? Age pyramids is the graphical representation. Age pyramids is the graphical representation. It is a graphical representation of population according to their age. So according to the age of population, we graphically represent and that is called as the age pyramid. And what age pyramid tells you about that? What kind of populations are more in a population and what kind of individuals are less in a population. So how this is told, see, important. In a population, there are 3 kinds of individuals which are found. Pre-reproductive individuals, that is the kids, the children who cannot reproduce right now. Then reproductive individuals, the adults, which has attained the puberty and can reproduce. And then comes the post-reproductive individuals, which are old individuals and they cannot reproduce, right? So if in a population, you can see in a population, if the kids are more, if the children are more, obviously that population will go on increasing. As in India, we have so many kids, and those kids will someday become adults, right? And they will reproduce. So if the number of pre-reproductive individuals is greater than reproductive individuals, if the number of pre-reproductive individuals is greater than reproductive and post-reproductive individuals, that means the population is expanding. It is increasing population, and the age pyramid, the shape of the age pyramid is triangular. It is triangular. But if the reproductive individuals, if the pre-reproductive individuals are only marginally more, if pre-reproductive individuals are only, if pre-reproductive individuals are only marginally greater than reproductive, that means almost similar, are only marginally more than reproductive individuals, that means there is not much difference between the number of reproductive individuals and the pre-reproductive individuals, then the population will be stable. That means there will be not much change in the population, and the kind of shape we get here is bell shape. Bell shape, right? You can see here, this is a bell shape. This is a triangular shape. And here, if the number of pre-reproductive individuals are lesser, that means the kids are lesser than the adults, then in the next lot, when these kids become reproductive, obviously there will be less. So pre-reproductive individuals are lesser than reproductive individuals. Then it will be a declining population. Then it will be a declining population, and a declining population shows an urn-shaped. What is urn shape? This is an urn shape, like a pot, like the shape of a pot. So this shape is urn shape. So what kind of question can come from this part? What kind of question can come from this part? This is important. What is an expanding population? Expanding population in which the pre-reproductive individuals are the greatest, the kids are the greatest, and that population will go on increasing, and the shape is triangular. If the pre-reproductive individuals, the kids, are almost similar to the reproductive individuals, that is adults, then the population is stable and the shape is bell-shaped. If the pre-reproductive individuals are lesser than the reproductive individuals, then the population will show negative growth and it will decline year by year. So the shape is urn shape. So you have to remember the shapes, and you have to remember that in which population pre-reproductive individuals are greatest, almost equal to reproductive individuals, and the least. Then after age pyramids, what's left? That is population density. Yes, one more population attribute is left, that is population density. So what is population density? That means number of individuals found in a particular area, in 1 meter square area per unit time. That is called as the population density. Population density can be measured through various ways. And what are the different ways in which we can measure that how many individuals are found in a particular area per unit time? Is that there can be a direct count, there can be biomass or percent cover, then there can be indirect count, or there can be relative density. So these are the 4 methods in which population density can be measured. So direct count means that you directly count the individuals, and this is the most appropriate method of calculating the population density. Like the NCRT has given, direct count means the direct count, the number of organisms, when you are counting the number of organisms directly. So this is the most appropriate method, right, to count. Biomass or percent cover. If I talk about a particular case, I'm saying that there is a banyan tree. In a habitat, there is a large banyan tree, and below that banyan tree, there are grasses. So this is a banyan tree. This is one single banyan tree, and there are 200 Parthenium grasses growing below it in the same area. So what you will say, whose population density is more? These are 200 Parthenium grasses and this is one single banyan tree. So what you will say, whose population density is more, banyan tree or Parthenium grass? Banyan tree, because the banyan tree is single in number, but it has a huge biomass. These small grasses, they are more in number, but the biomass is very less. So in these type of cases, the population density is not seen by the number, but by the biomass or the percent cover. So here, the population density, the biomass of banyan the population density or biomass of banyan is much greater than Parthenium. Okay, so this is another method of calculating the population density. Then indirect count. Indirect count, you can take the example of pug marks or fecal pellets of tigers. Pug marks or fecal pellets of tigers. Sometimes the population of tigers cannot be counted directly, but they are counted with the help of their pug marks and their fecal pellets. So this is indirect count. Then the relative density. Then sometimes it is not easy. It is not easy to count the number of organisms, because it is not easy to calculate the number of unicellular green algae in the pond. So when it is not easy to calculate the number, so we go with the relative density. What is the relative density? You calculate the density of a particular organism in relation to all the organisms living in that area. That is like the relative velocity in physics, relative density. Okay, so these are the various methods of calculating the population density. So we have discussed the population attributes: birth rate, death rate, age pyramids, population density. Now let's move on to population growth. Population growth, that a population is growing or not growing, is controlled by 4 factors. That is natality. Now you know what is natality: the birth rate, the number of live births; mortality, that is the death rate, the number of deaths. Then immigration. Immigration is the entry of individuals in a population. This represents the entry of individuals in a population. When new individuals enters in a population, this is emigration, and E is for exit. Exit of individuals from a population. Exit of individuals from a population. So remember this beta. I for in. In means when the new individuals are coming into a population. E for exit, when the individuals are going away from the population. So these are the 4 factors which together controls that whether the population will grow or it will not grow. So this is the definition given by NCERT, that natality refers to the number of births, mortality, number of deaths; immigration, number of individuals of the same species that have come into the habitat; and emigration is number of individuals that has gone from the habitat. Okay. Now this is the diagram given in NCERT. If I am to calculate I have to calculate the population density in a particular area, then the population density, how it can be calculated: the natality or the birth rate, the number of births. Obviously the natality will increase the population density, but the mortality will decrease the population density. The immigration will increase the population density, while the emigration will decrease the population density. So these together controls the population density. Now how we calculate that whether a population will show growth or it will show negative growth? So there is a formula for that, that is at nt plus 1, nt plus 1 is equal to nt plus b plus I minus b plus I minus d plus e. See, nt plus 1 means population at time t plus 1, and t means initial population. B is the birth rate, I is the immigration, d is the death rate, e is the emigration. So if b plus I is greater than d plus e, so obviously this population will increase. Here the population growth is positive. That means the population will grow. But if B plus I is equal to D plus E, that means here the population growth is zero. The population is stable. The population growth is stable. The size of population is not changing. It is same, it is constant. But if B plus I is lesser than D plus E, then obviously population growth is negative. That means the population size will decrease. So B plus I are the two factors which increases the population, and D, death rate and emigration, are the factors which decreases the population. So together all these four controls the population growth. If B plus I is greater, the population will grow, the population size will increase. But B plus I is equal to D plus E, there will be no growth. That means the population size will remain same. But if B plus I is lesser than D plus E, then the population will show negative growth. That means the population size, the population density will decrease. Now there are beautiful lines from NCERT which are important. It is saying that under normal conditions, birth and death are the most important factors influencing population density. If I am talking about the normal habitat, the normal conditions, then birth rate and the death rate are two important factors that controls the population density. But see, for special condition, if the habitat is just being colonized, that means the habitat is not fully formed, it is being colonized. That means it is forming, it is in the formative phase. The organisms are coming and going. So if the habitat is not colonized yet, but it is under the process of colonization, it is under the process of formation, then immigration is the most important factor. Under normal condition, death and birth rate are the important factors. But if the habitat is colonizing, then immigration is the most important factor which affects the population density. Okay, now let's discuss the two types of growth models. These growth models tell us that how growth can occur in a habitat. And the growth models can be of two types: exponential growth and logistic growth. First, let's take the exponential growth. Exponential growth is a type of growth which considers that the resources are unlimited. So you can see exponential growth under the condition of unlimited resources. That means when the organism is getting unlimited resources, it will show exponential growth. It will show exponential growth. So how exponential growth will be seen? See, just a second, beta. So yes, so under the conditions of unlimited resources, this type of growth is shown by the organism. If I take time here and if I take the population size here, then the exponential growth shows a J-shaped curve. It shows a J-shaped curve. The exponential growth is also called as the geometric growth, right? So what happens, beta? Every individual has the capacity to achieve its maximum reproductive fitness if it is given all the resources. Maximum reproductive fitness. Every organism on earth tries to achieve maximum reproductive fitness so that it can add maximum number of individuals to the population so that its own population can increase on Earth. But generally on Earth, it is not done. Generally, the Earth has maintained the environment in such a way that the organisms are unable to reach their biotic potential, to reach their maximum reproductive fitness. Imagine if every organism on Earth would have achieved their maximum reproductive fitness, then what would have been happened on the Earth? Even in these conditions, when the organisms are unable to reach their reproductive fitness, then too population is so high, right? So when the organism is provided with unlimited resources, then organism reaches its R value. Generally, it doesn't happen. Generally in nature, the organism does not achieve its R value. Organism achieves its R value. Now, what is this R value? This is very important, very important. This R value is also called as the intrinsic rate of natural increase. This is called as intrinsic rate of intrinsic rate of natural increase, or biotic potential, or Darwinian fitness. Biotic potential or fecundity rate, or Darwinian fitness. Or Darwinian fitness. So there are various names for R value. R value, or intrinsic rate of natural increase, or biotic potential, or fecundity rate, or Darwinian fitness. That means it is reproductive fitness. This is reproductive fitness. If I say that an organism has achieved its R value, that means it has achieved the capability to reproduce maximally and to add as much members as in the population. So what happens during the exponential growth? Due to unlimited resources, the organism achieve its R value, and the population, the size of the population increases in a very exponential method. That is why it shows the J-shaped curve. So if I have to represent this exponential graph, the change of population dn by dt will be equal to b minus d into n. B minus d into n. So what is b minus d over here? B minus d, this is important. What is b minus d here? B is the birth rate and d is the death rate. So beta, b minus d is nothing but it is equal to r. It is equal to r. So what I can say, that dn by dt is equal to rn. dn by dt represents the increase in the population size, the rate of growth, and b minus d, birth rate, death rate, and birth rate minus death rate is the measure of r value, and it is equal to dn by dt is equals to r. So what are the examples that can be given to show the exponential growth? First example is the growth of insect population during rainy season. Growth of insect population during rainy season. And second example is the algal bloom in polluted water bodies. In polluted water bodies. Right? So this is important. When rainy season comes, you must have seen that the population of mosquitoes increases so much. and when the rainy season gets over, the population of the insects, it crashes down, right? So during the rainy season, the insects, the mosquito, they get the unlimited resources for some period of time, and in that period of time they achieve their R value and add maximum number of individuals in the population. Likewise, in a polluted water body, the algae, the blue-green algae, they get the unlimited resources and they divide extensively and add to the population, right? So these are the two examples when the organism are getting unlimited resources and they achieve their R value and increase their population size exponentially, right? So remember, so exponential growth or geometric growth can be explained when the resources are unlimited, and during those conditions the organism achieve its maximum reproductive fitness and add new number of individuals exponentially. But when those unlimited resources they get away, then there is a mass death. So then there will be a crash phase, and this crash phase shows mass death. It shows mass death. When the rainy season gets over, the population of insect, it gets reduced like this. So mass death, crash phase, because unlimited resources are gone. Okay? And you have to remember the equation, dn by dt is equals to b minus d into n, and b minus d is nothing but r, so rn. And you have to remember the examples. Now let's understand the logistic growth. The logistic growth is the realistic growth, the kind of growth which is seen in nature, generally seen in nature. So this is the realistic type of growth which is seen in nature, because this considers that the resources in nature are limited, and which is true. The resources in nature are limited. And under the conditions of limited resources, the growth pattern which is shown is that of the logistic type. Okay. So why is that so? So in this growth curve, an organism is not able to achieve its R value, is not able to achieve its R value. Why? Because of the limited resources. So in the J-shaped curve, the organism was able to achieve the R value because of unlimited resources, but here it is unable to achieve the R value because of the limited resources. So it will not be able to add many individuals in the population, right? So why an organism is not able to achieve its R value? Why? What is the reason behind that? The reason is of two. The reasons are two. First, the carrying capacity, and second, the environmental resistance. First is the environmental resistance, and second is the carrying capacity. So there are two things. There are two things which prevents the organisms to achieve their R value. First is the environmental resistance and second is the carrying capacity. So let's understand first what is carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is represented as K. So what is carrying capacity here? We will say that it is the maximum number of individuals. Maximum number of individuals an ecosystem can support. Maximum number of individuals an ecosystem can support, right? Suppose there is a limit. There is a limit of every ecosystem that it can support only these much individuals, not more than that. If you will add more individuals to the ecosystem, then the ecosystem will say no to it. I don't have much resources to provide to the extra individuals. So suppose the K value, the K for ecosystem is, the carrying capacity of an ecosystem is 100, right? If population size, I am denoting the population size by n, right? So I am denoting the population size by n. I am taking population size as n. So if I'm taking population size as n and the carrying capacity as k, so if n is lesser than k, that means if n is lesser than k, that means the individuals which are present in the ecosystem are less than 100. So the ecosystem will support. So population growth will occur. Population growth will be positive. Population growth will be positive because the ecosystem can adjust more individuals. But if the population size becomes equal to k, that means the ecosystem can support 100 individuals and there are 100 individuals in the ecosystem. So now the population growth will be 0. The population will not grow further. It will become static. So population growth is 0. It will not further increase. It will remain the same. But if the n is greater than k, that means an ecosystem can support only 100 individuals, but now there are 120 individuals in the ecosystem. Then the ecosystem will say, oh my God, how will I do now? I don't have enough resources now. So what will happen? Population growth will be negative. The population will start declining because of the extreme competition for resources. So population growth will be negative. Population growth will be negative. Okay, so this is important. I hope you understood what is carrying capacity. Then comes the environmental resistance. Environmental resistance are all those factors in the nature which prevents the organism to achieve their R value, right? So factors which prevents organisms to achieve their R value. Because every organism should not achieve their R value, then what will happen on Earth? Factors which prevents organisms to achieve their R value. And what are those factors which prevents the organisms to attain their maximum reproductive fitness? Those can be abiotic factors and they can be biotic factors. Abiotic factors will be obviously the resources, the light, the temperature, right? Availability of water. These are the things which controls the population growth. Biotic, obviously, interaction between the organisms. How in a population they are interacting between each other. So interactions between the organisms like predation. If the deer wants to achieve its R value, can it achieve its R value? Because tiger is there. It will not allow the deer to achieve its R value. It will eat it. So predation. Then parasitism, competition. So these are the several hurdles which an organism has to face, and because of them the organism cannot achieve its R value. Okay, And what is the formula of environmental resistance? The formula for environmental resistance is equal to K minus N upon K. The formula for environmental resistance is K minus N upon K. This is important. Okay. What is K here? K is the carrying capacity of the ecosystem and N is the population size. So I hope you understood that in a logistic growth curve, under the conditions of limited resources, an organism is unable to achieve its maximum reproductive fitness, its R value, because of the environmental resistance and the carrying capacity. And this is the formula for environmental resistance, that is K minus N upon K. So these are the factors which are responsible for the so that the organism cannot achieve its R value. Now let's see that what is the equation that represents the logistic growth. So here dN by dt, what was the equation before? dN by dt is equal to Rn. It was the equation of geometric growth which was representing under unlimited resources. But now I have to add one more thing, and that is environmental resistance, K minus N upon K. So if I add environmental resistance in the formula of geometrical growth, it will become the equation of the logistic growth curve. So dN by dt is equals to Rn K minus N upon K, and this K minus N upon K is environmental resistance. And there is one more way I can write it as dN by dt is equal to Rn 1 minus N upon K. Right? If I take the LCM, then it can be written as this also. So if the equation comes in this form, then don't get confused. It's one and the same thing. Now let's discuss the curve. If I am taking time here and here the population size, then the type of growth curve it shows is called as S-shaped curve. Here in the geometrical growth curve, it was J-shaped curve, but here it is sigmoid or S-shaped curve. Sigmoid or S-shaped curve. So in a S-shaped curve, there are mainly three stages. This one, the first one is the lag phase. This one is the log phase. This one is the small declining phase, and this one is asymptote, right? So this is log or exponential phase. This is the lag phase, LAG, lag. This is log phase. This is the declining phase. This is the declining phase, and this is called as the asymptote or the stationary phase. So suppose that example I can take here is of a bacterial population, a bacteria growing on a culture medium. Bacteria growing on a culture medium, right? So when I put a bacteria on a culture medium where I have provided all the organism, then it will start growing. So initially it will grow slowly because it is learning to use the resources, but after a point of time it will grow exponentially. The number of bacterial population will increase by using the resources, but the pattern has to go like this. The pattern has to go like this, but there is a slight decline, there is a slight decrease in the population. Why? Because the resources now are getting used up, and there will be a stage when the resources will be used up fully, so there will be no increase in the population size, and there will be stationary or asymptote phase where the population growth is zero. There is no population growth, no individuals are added, because here the resources are exhausted. So what happens during asymptote stage? What happens during the asymptote stage? The resources are exhausted, or you can say that the limit is achieved. The resources are exhausted and the population growth is zero. Population growth is zero. There will be no increase. The population will become constant, and if there are no nutrients, then it will start declining also, right? So asymptote phase is the phase where n has become equal to k. That means the number of individuals an ecosystem can support is already equal to n. Okay, so remember the equations, the graphs, and the examples. Now let's move on to another topic which is important, that is life history variations. What is the meaning of it? During the course of evolution, every organism tries different ways so that they can achieve their R value, so that they can achieve Darwinian fitness. So there are several strategies adopted by the organism so that they can try to achieve the R value. So what are those strategies? The strategies is the breeding habit. Some of the organisms, they breed only once in their lifetime, so that when they will breed profusely, like the bamboo plant. If a bamboo plant lives for 100 years, it will produce flowers only once in a lifetime, and whenever there will be flowering on bamboo tree, the whole bamboo plant will be filled up with the flowers and then it will die. So some organisms, they make the strategy that they will breed only once in their lifetime, and when they will breed like hell. So some organisms have adopted the strategy that they will breed only once in their lifetime, and the examples are Pacific salmon fish and bamboo. The example directly comes. The question can ask, give the example of two organisms which breed only once in their lifetime to maximize their reproductive fitness. So Pacific salmon fish or bamboo. But some of the organisms breed many times. Some of the organisms have adopted the strategy that they will breed many times to achieve their R value, like most birds and most mammals. Then the second strategy is number and size of offsprings. Some organisms have adopted the strategy that they will produce small sized organism in a large number. Small sized organisms in a large number. Example, oysters and pelagic fish. But some organisms have adopted the strategy that they will produce very few organisms, very few kids, but of large size, like in birds and mammals. Right? Like in humans, we give birth only to one infant at a time. Okay, so these are the different strategies adopted by different organisms to achieve their R value. Direct question comes, example based question comes. Now comes the population interactions. How in a population the different organisms interact amongst themselves for the resources. So the different kind of interactions seen in a population are, first, mutualism, where both the individuals, both the species are benefited from each other. Then comes competition. In competition is a minus interactions. That means both the species gets harmed by competition. Predation is a plus-minus relationship where predator gets benefited and the prey dies during predation. Parasitism is also a plus minus, where a parasite gets the benefit and the host is at victim side because it is providing resources to the parasite. Commensalism is a plus zero relationship where one species is getting benefited but the other species is not either harmed or profited by the species A. Amensalism is minus zero. One species is getting negatively affected and there is no effect on the other species. So these are the different kinds of population interactions which you must remember. Okay, so first of all, let's take the example of So first of all, let's take the example of mutualism. So mutualism is a plus type relationship, right? Plus, where both the organism, they gets benefited. Okay. So mutualism, the beautiful example of mutualism is lichen and mycorrhiza. Lichen and mycorrhiza. These are the two important examples of mutualism where both the organisms show obligate association. What is the meaning of obligate association? That both the organism, they cannot live with each other. They show obligate association during mutualism. So lichen is a symbiotic. The mutualism is also called in another terms as symbiotic relationship. It is also called as the symbiotic relationship. So lichen is the association between algae and the fungi. The algal part is called as phycobiont and the fungal part is called as mycobiont. You know what is the function of fungi? It takes care of reproduction. It takes care of the absorption of mineral and ions. It takes care of the formation of structure of lichen, whereas algae performs the function of photosynthesis. So this is an obligate symbiotic relationship where algae provides food to the fungi and fungi takes care of the rest of the things. So it is an obligate association. Then mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza is an association of roots of higher plants plus the fungi. Roots of higher plants plus fungi. And I have told you this in detail in the lecture of plant kingdom. I've told you this in detail in the lecture of plant kingdom, and I've told you that there is two kinds of mycorrhiza, ectomycorrhiza and endomycorrhiza. If the fungal hyphae remains on the surface of root, ectomycorrhiza, and a very good example was Pinus. Pinus, a gymnosperm, show obligate association with the fungi Boletus. Boletus is a fungi which is found associated with the Pinus plant, which is a gymnosperm, and there is obligate relationship. Both of them cannot live with each other. And the second type of mycorrhiza is endomycorrhiza, which I have told you that it is also called as VAM. And orchids are the plants which show endomycorrhizal association, and the name of the fungi is Glomus. Glomus is the largest genus of fungi. I have told you this in microbes in human welfare. Glomus is the largest genus of fungi which shows endomycorrhizal association. So mycorrhiza and lichen both represents obligate mutualistic symbiotic association. Now, another example is plant-animal mutualism. We can see the mutualism in plants and animals in the form of zoophily. What is zoophily? Zoophily is that the animals help the plants in pollination. Insects, snails, snakes, elephants, the animals help the plants in pollination, and in turn the plant provide rewards to the animals. So this is zoophily, which represents mutualistic association between plants and animals. And the another example is zoochory. The seed of the plants are dispersed with the help of animals, and in turn the animals eat some of the seeds to get the nutrition. So this is how the mutualistic association works. Now let's see the case of co-evolution. Co-evolution or obligate association. That means, what is the meaning of co-evolution? That the two organisms are associated so closely, that their evolution has happened side by side. They are so closely associated that they are evoluted during the course of evolution together. So this is co-evolution. And the example of co-evolution can be taken, the very beautiful example, fig and wasp. Fig is the plant belonging to the genus of Ficus, and wasp is the insect. During the course of evolution, both of them, fig is pollinated only by the insect wasp, and wasp lays its eggs. Wasp lays its eggs in the inflorescence of fig. Inside the inflorescence of fig. So they are so closely associated that they cannot live without each other, and they have evolved in the course of evolution together. Second example is Pronuba moth and yucca plant. Pronuba moth and yucca plant. The next example is orchids and bees. So these are some examples of co-evolution, which are the examples where the both of the organisms, their evolution has happened together and they are very closely associated to each other. These are important examples, directly comes in the question paper. Then here is another example. See, this is fig and wasp. This is the diagram of fig and wasp. The fig, this is the inflorescence of the fig plant, and the wasp insect lays its egg inside the inflorescence, and it has the safe place for the eggs of the wasp. Then the another example, very beautiful example, is the example of co-evolution. It is not mutualism. This particular example is not of example of mutualism but of co-evolution. So how it is the example of co-evolution? There is an orchid. There is an orchid whose name is Ophrys. There is an orchid whose name is Ophrys. Right. The flower of this orchid resembles the female of Colpa insect. Colpa insect is a type of bee, right? So this is the orchid plant. The flower of this orchid plant resembles the female of the Colpa insect. So what happens? Male of the male Colpa bee comes near orchid flower, thinking that this flower is its female, but that is not the female Colpa, that is the flower of orchid. So when it comes and sits, it realizes, oh, this is not my female, but until then the pollen grains get stick to the male Colpa, and when it flies, it gets no reward from Ophrys. The Ophrys plant gives no rewards to the male colpa for pollination, and the male colpa is disappointed. So this is the case of sexual deceit or pseudo copulation, where the male colpa insect reaches to the female flower thinking that female flower is its own female insect. So come near orchid flower and pseudo copulates it. So during the course of evolution, the orchid flower has changed itself in a way that it gets the pollination done without the floral reward, right? If the female colpa insect in the evolution will try to change its appearance, the flower will also change its appearance. So it is a case of co-evolution, right? So male colpa B will pseudocopulate the flower. So it is a case of sexual deceit. It's the case of sexual deceit or pseudo-copulation, where the insect is not getting any floral reward for pollination. Okay, so it is not the example of mutualism, it is the example of co-evolution. Okay, now let's move to commensalism. It's a +0 relationship where the one organism which is getting benefited is called as the commensal. The organism which is benefited is commensal, and the other organism is neither harmed nor benefited. So it's at 0 side. So the important examples are orchids. Orchids are often found on the mango for space. So they are getting benefited because orchid is getting the space, but mango is neither harmed nor benefited. So orchid is a commensal and mango, no harm, no benefit. Then barnacles, these are small arthropods. Barnacles found on whale. Barnacles gets the protection, whale neither harmed nor benefited. Clownfish. Clownfish is a small fish which resides amongst sea anemone. So it gets the protection from the enemies because of sea anemone, and sea anemone is neither benefited nor harmed. Cattle ergets. These are small birds found on the back of cattle. Cattle are neither benefited nor harmed, but these birds, they get the benefit. Why? Because when the cattle walk in the grasses, the insects, they fly, and these birds take those insects. So these 4 are the important examples of commensalism, where these are commensal and these are the hosts which are neither benefited nor harmed. So direct question comes. The example will come and it will ask what kind of association is this. Then comes amensalism. Amensalism is -0 relationship where one organism is getting harmed and the another organism is neither harmed nor benefited. So the organism which is getting harmed is a victim, and the organism which is causing the harm is amensal. The organism which is causing the harm is amensal, and the organism which is victim is at minus side. So the example of amensalism is antibiosis. The fungi Penicillium naturally secretes some chemical, that is penicillin. So penicillin is neither benefited or not harmed by this, because it is the work of penicillin to secrete that chemical. But the bacteria Staphylococcus get harmed by the penicillin because it kills the bacteria. So it is minus for Staphylococcus and it is 0 for penicillium because it naturally secretes that chemical. Likewise, Streptomyces, which is another bacteria, naturally secretes antibiotics, which is detrimental and harmful to other bacteria. So these are the examples of amensalism. Then comes parasitism. Obviously, it is -0, where -1 is a host which is getting harmed. Oh my God, it is minus plus, sorry, it is minus plus. So organism which is harmed is a host and the organism which is getting benefited is the parasite. So parasite takes nutrition from the host. And there are certain adaptations which are seen in parasites during the course of evolution. The parasites have lost their sense organs because they are totally dependent on their host. The parasites, they have lost their digestive system because they take nutrition from the host. There are presence of suckers with which they attach themselves to the host, and then they have complex life cycles like the life cycle of Plasmodium. They have complex life cycles. So these are 4 important adaptations which are there in the parasites so that they can easily exist inside the host. So these are important. These 4 adaptations are important. Then the parasites can be of 2 types, ecto or endo. Ectoparasites live on the surface of the host, like the lices on humans and ticks on dogs, and Cuscuta. Cuscuta is a plant which is also called as amarbale in common language. It's a non-green plant. It does not make its own food. It's a plant, but it does not perform photosynthesis. It is present on the another plant, host plant, and develops special roots called as hostorial roots. These hostorial roots penetrate into the host plant and takes nourishment from it. Okay. Then comes endoparasites, the parasites which goes inside the body of host and derives nutrition from it. Example, Plasmodium and various other pathogens. Then there is another type of parasitism called as brood parasitism. What is brood parasitism? You must have heard the koel bird, right? The cuckoo bird. So the cuckoo bird lays its egg in the nest of the crow, and crow thinks that, oh, this is my own offsprings, and it raises the eggs of the, so crow takes care the eggs of cuckoo bird. So here the cuckoo bird is a parasite on crow for taking care of its eggs. So this kind of parasitism is called as brood parasitism. Okay, so remember the important adaptations, ecto and endoparasites and the brood parasites. Then comes competition. Competition is a minus interaction where both the organism gets harmed by the competition. Competition can be intraspecific between same species, and it can be interspecific, that is between different species. One more thing I had to tell in parasitism, there's a question asked in NCERT that female Anopheles mosquito, the malaria is caused due to mosquito, right? Is this true? No, this is false. So the mosquito is not a parasite. Mosquito is not a parasite. Mosquito does not cause malaria. It's not a parasite. It's a vector. Female Anopheles is a vector which carries Plasmodium. Actually, this Plasmodium is the parasite. Okay. So when a mosquito gives us a bite, it injects the Plasmodium into our blood, and that Plasmodium is a parasite which causes the malaria. So remember, the female Anopheles mosquito is not a parasite. It's a vector which carries the parasite Plasmodium, which is injected into our blood and causes malaria. Okay. And yes, the host, an ideal parasite will not try to kill its host, because a parasite wants that its host remain alive because it will take the nutrition. So an ideal parasite will want the host to live longer, but it doesn't happen. When a parasite enters into the host body, it causes various harms to the host. What harms? It reduces its Immunity, it reduces its survival rate, it reduces its reproductive rate. So what are the harms that are caused to the host by the parasite? Reduction in the reproductive rate, reduction in survival rate, and reduction in their immunity. Okay? Yes. So intraspecific competition and interspecific competition. So think, what kind of competition would be more bad, more severe? Intra, within the same species, because the members of the same species are adapted to use only one kind of resources, and if those resources are not there, then the competition will be very tough. So intra-specific competition is more severe, it is more bad than interspecific competition. Okay, remember this point. Now, competition can be seen in closely related species. Generally, competition is seen in closely related species, like between birds, like between dogs. Okay, but sometimes the competition is seen between totally unrelated species. Like one example is given in NCERT, flamingos and fishes. Flamingos are birds and fishes. They are found in South American lake. So flamingos are birds and fishes, they compete for the zooplanktons found in the lake. So these are two unrelated species which show competition. So generally competition is seen between the closely related species, but sometimes it can be seen between totally unrelated species like flamingos and fishes in the South American lake. Important example. Then competition can be seen when the resources are limited as well as when the resources are unlimited. Because what happens is that sometimes in an ecosystem, there is no problem of resources, but a superior species do not allow the inferior species to use the resources. So in presence of a superior species, the inferior species is unable to use the resources. There is no limitation of resources, but this species is unable to use the resources. So the competition can be seen in limited resources condition and in unlimited resources condition. Okay? These question comes directly. Now competition can be seen in two forms: competition exclusion and competition coexistence. Sometime what happens that during competition, a superior species removes the inferior species from the area. This is called as competition exclusion. But sometime what happens that when the competition is there between species, then species, they comes to an agreement that, okay, let's not fight. Let's divide the resources in between us and live happily. This is competition coexistence. So let's discuss both of them one by one. First, let's take the example of competition exclusion. Competition exclusion, the theory of competition exclusion was given by the scientist Gauss. Important question. Gauss gave the theory of competition exclusion. What this principle says that in an area during competition, a superior species eliminates the inferior species from the area. Excludes. Exclusion means eliminates the inferior species. So this is competition exclusion principle. And the important examples are Balanus. Balanus is a type of arthropod which is a superior barnacle. It removes Cathamelus if they are present in the same area. If they are present in the same area, then Balanus will exclude, will remove, will eliminate Cathamelus from the area. Then goat. Galapagos Island, you know what is Galapagos Island. When in the Galapagos Island, goats were introduced, the Abingdon tortoise were extinct, were eliminated from there. Then Paramecium aurelia is the superior species which, if present with Paramecium caudatum, will remove Paramecium caudatum. So these are the superior species which will eliminate the inferior species if they are present together. This is competition exclusion principle. The examples are important. The question comes directly. Which will eliminate which? Obviously, if the statement says that Cathamelus will remove Balanus, that would be wrong. So you have to remember which are the superior ones and which are the inferior ones. The inferior ones will be eliminated, right? So these are the nice example. See, this is the Abingdon tortoise. This is the Abingdon tortoise, which will be eliminated in the presence of the goat in the Galapagos Island. So if they are present together, the goat will eliminate the Abingdon tortoise, because the grazing capacity of goat is better than Abingdon tortoise. Both of them are herbivores. Okay, then second example is Balanus and Cathamelus. These both are the arthropods, right? So this Balanus is the superior species and Cathamelus is the inferior. If they are present together, Balanus will remove Cathamelus. Okay, so this is competition exclusion. Now comes the competitive coexistence. It says that if the closely related species are present in area and they are competing, then they divide their resources. And they say, let's not fight, let's divide the resources and live, and let's coexist. Let's live together by dividing the resources. So coexistence is called as the resource partitioning. It is also called as resource partitioning. And the concept of competitive coexistence or resource partitioning was given by MacArthur. That means the resources are divided. The resources are divided and used coexistently. The beautiful examples are 5 closely related species of warblers, right? So MacArthur saw that 5 closely related species of warblers were not eliminating each other, but they were coexisting because they have divided their resources. Likewise, the Darwin finches, the different kinds of Darwin finches, they coexist in the Galapagos Island. So these are the 2 examples of coexistence or resource partitioning. Then a question comes, what is the evidence of competition? How can you give the evidence that competition is happening? So evidence of competition is competition release. Evidence of competition is competition release. How will you understand that, okay, competition is happening? By competition release. Say, per se, if I am saying that I have introduced Cathamelus and Balanus both in one area, and I want to understand the process of competition. So if I will remove Balanus from that area, only in that condition Cathamelus will survive. Otherwise, Cathamelus will be eliminated by the Balanus. So this is the proof of competition. That means there is only one reason why Cathamelus was not able to grow into that area, because of the presence of the competitor, that is Balanus. And if I remove that competitor, the Cathamelus will grow. So if I release the competition, only in that condition Cathamelus will grow. And this is the evidence of competition. So this is very important. Connell's elegant field experiment. This is important. Competition release can be understood by Connell's. This question comes directly. Connell's elegant field experiment. What is this experiment which is giving us the proof of occurrence of competition? This experiment, Connell's elegant field experiment, says that on the rocky sea coast of Scotland, when the superior barnacle is released, then only the Cathamelus can grow. Okay, so Connell's elegant field experiment, this scientist deliberately removed the Balanus from the rocky sea of Scotland, and then he observed that Cathamelus grew. In the presence, Cathamelus didn't grow. So this is the example of competition release. Okay. Now that comes predation. So what is predation? It is again minus plus association. Minus is the prey and plus is the predator. So there is a question which comes in the mind that both parasitism and predation are plus minus relationship. Then how they differ from each other? In the parasitism, the parasite do not kill host, but here the predator will kill the prey. This is the difference. Okay. So let's take some example of prey and predator. You know, tiger is a predator and the prey is a deer. Herbivores are also predators. I am a predator because I eat plants. I kill them and eat them. So I am also a predator. Sparrow, which is a bird, it's a predator because it feeds on seeds. It eats the seed. And all the herbivores are predators because they eat the plants. So these are some examples of predators and prey. Now, predators are very, very important for any ecosystem. Think, if tiger is not there in a forest, then the deer population will grow uncontrollably, and then the deer will eat all the plants. Then what will happen? There will be an imbalance in the ecosystem. So predators are not bad. They are very important for stability of an ecosystem. So what are the important functions the predators play in an ecosystem? This is an important question. The very first function is transfer of energy across the trophic levels. Because the predators eat the prey, then they transfer the energy to the another trophic level. Herbivores eat on the plants, then carnivores feed on herbivores, then on carnivores, top carnivores feed. So what is the function of predator here? Predator is helpful in transferring the energy from one trophic level to another, right? So this is very important line. Second, it keeps prey population under control. If predator is not there, then prey population will be uncontrollable and there will be imbalance. And all those organisms which naturally kill their prey, they can be used as biocontrol agents. And I have told you this in microbes in human welfare. I have told the example of a ladybird which naturally kills aphids. Right? So it's a predator, natural predator of aphids. I have given you the example of dragonflies, which feeds on the mosquitoes, right? So biocontrol agents like the Gambusa fish. Gambusa fish is a natural predator which feeds on mosquito larvae. So they are biocontrol agents. They control the prey population, right? Then comes, they maintain species diversity. And there is one more example given in NCERT, and that is the example of moth. There is a special type of moth which is a natural predator, and it feeds on prickly pear cactus. Prickly pear cactus, which is a prey. And this prickly pear cactus is a problematic weed. This is unwanted plant. So this is a prey. Prickly pear cactus is a prey of what? An insect, that is moth. And naturally it controls the population of this problematic weed. So they can act as biocontrol agents and maintain the ecological balance. Then they maintain species diversity. If tiger is not there, then there will be only deer. And if there will be only deer, they will eat all the plants. So species diversity is increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. So predators are very important to maintain species diversity in an ecosystem. So these are the three important functions performed by predators. Very important. Direct question comes. Okay, so this is a very beautiful example. The diagram you can see here, it's a pisaster fish. It's a pisaster fish. Okay. So there was an experiment done in the American Pacific coast. American Pacific coast. What was done? Deliberately, this pisaster fish, which is a natural predator, this pisaster fish is a natural predator. So this pisaster fish was deliberately removed from the American Pacific coast, and what was observed that due to the removal of this pisaster fish from the American Pacific coast, there was extinction of 10 species of invertebrates. 10 species of invertebrates were gone, were extinct from that area. That means predators are very important to maintain species diversity. If predators are not in the ecosystem, then species diversity will get down, then the species will be extinct. Okay, so this is an example of if you remove predator, then there will be extinction of species and species diversity will reduce. Important example. Then comes, yes. So now let's discuss that this was about the predator. Now let's discuss about the prey. Prey also have evolved. They also have evolved to protect themselves from predators. There are many adaptations seen in the prey to protect themselves from predator, and those adaptations which are seen in the prey population so that they can protect themselves from the predator are camouflage. You know what is camouflage? When the prey changes its color and gets like chameleon, it gets lost in the environment and the predator is unable to find it. Mimicry can be there. Mimicry is a phenomenon where one organism which is a stronger, the organism which is weak mimics the stronger organism so that the predator is frightened from it. Okay. So there are certain adaptations which prey population has shown to protect themselves from predator. And the very important example is of Calotropis. This is a Calotropis plant. This is a Calotropis plant, and what adaptation it has shown to protect itself from grazing animals. So this Calotropis plant is a prey and the grazing animals are the predators. So what Calotropis has done so that it can protect itself from the predators or the grazing animals, it forms cardiac glycosides. It forms cardiac glycosides. These are the chemicals. These are the chemical which is formed by this plant to protect itself from grazing animals. What happens when the grazing animals eat this plant? They suffer heart attack. Cardiac glycoside, the chemical which attacks on the heart of the grazing animal. So now the grazing animals do not go near to this plant because they know that if they will go near to this plant, they will be dead. So this is the adaptation in the Calotropis plant. Very important. Calotropis plant forms cardiac glycosides to protect themselves from the grazing animals, right? So many plants form many chemicals to protect themselves from grazing plants. Many plants forms many chemicals to protect themselves from grazing animals. There are several chemicals like There are certain given in NCERT, strychnine, quinine, etc. Many chemicals are formed by the plant which protect themselves from the grazing animals. Then comes the example of monarch butterfly. This is the diagram you're seeing here is the diagram of monarch butterfly. This monarch butterfly, it forms toxic substances, and the natural predator and how it forms the toxic substances, it is the monarch butterfly does not form the toxic substances, but it get it from the insect on which it feeds. It feeds on another insect, on another plant from which it gets the chemical, and that chemical is toxic. So it forms the toxic substances which protect itself, which protects the monarch butterfly from its predator, right? From its predators, right? So this is an important case of forming the chemicals to protect themselves from the grazing, from the predator. Okay, so monarch butterfly does not form the toxic substance, it gets it from poisonous plant on which it feeds. So monarch butterfly feeds on a plant, on a poisonous plant during the caterpillar stage, and that poisonous plant had that toxic substance. So this butterfly retains that toxic substance throughout the life, and this toxic substance prevent the monarch butterfly from its predator. So many adaptations are there, right? One more adaptation is there in the plants like acacia and cactus. In plants like acacia and cactus, there are thorns, and these thorns protect themselves from the grazing animals. Okay, so many prey population have adapted to protect themselves from the predators. Okay, and yes, the plants are the most most affected by the process of this predation. Why? Because they cannot move, they cannot protect themselves. So the most affected individuals by predation, are plants, because they cannot move, and because they cannot move, they cannot protect themselves, but still they have during the course of evolution adapted themselves in a way that they can protect themselves without moving. Okay, so hence the chapter is over. I hope you understood the chapter well, which will help you both in NEET and your term 2 examinations. Listen to the lecture carefully and then read your NCERTs, and your chapter will be prepared. So bye, and we will meet in the next lectures. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and work hard.